Everything in this room is white. White marble, white cabinets, white orchids. It looks like a sanctuary. In reality, it was a crime scene. I just didn't know it yet. I was standing in my laundry room, buried under a mountain of grass-stained soccer jerseys and overpriced silk pillowcases. The air smelled like lavender detergent and that faint metallic scent of a dying water heater. It was the scent of my life, a life I thought was safe, a life I thought I had earned by being the perfect wife for 10 years. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't the rhythmic tap of the mailman. It was a firm, singular chime that felt heavy, like a judge's gavel hitting wood. I wiped my damp hands on my leggings and walked to the front door. Through the frosted glass, I saw a silhouette, stiff, expensive. Standing on my porch was Arthur Sterling, the senior partner at my husband Mark's law firm. I'd seen Arthur at a dozen Christmas galas. Each time he'd looked right through me. To him, I was just another piece of expensive furniture Mark had installed in the house to look successful. But today, his eyes were locked on mine, and for the first time in a decade, the most powerful lawyer in New York looked terrified. His silk tie was crooked. There was a bead of sweat rolling down his temple, despite the cool September breeze. "Mrs. Thorne," he whispered urgently, "we need the Tuesday invoices, now." I blinked. The sunlight reflecting off his gold watch was stinging my eyes. "The what, Arthur? Mark is at the office. You know I don't handle his work." "Don't," he snapped, his voice cracking. "We don't have time for the clueless housewife act, Sarah. The auditors arrive at 2 p.m. If we don't have the Project Ghost files, the feds aren't just going to shut down the firm, they're going to come for this house. They're going to come for you." I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. "I don't work for the firm, Arthur. I fold laundry, I pack school lunches. I think you've misplaced your common sense." Arthur let out a dry, jagged laugh. "Don't play modest. According to the state of New York, you aren't just a mom. You're the chief operating officer of Thorne and Associates. You signed the payroll. You authorized the offshore transfers to the Cayman accounts. And if those files disappear, you're the one who goes to prison for the next 20 years. In that moment, the floor felt like it was tilting. My quiet, lucky life wasn't a dream. It was a front, a cardboard cutout of a happy home. But as I looked into Arthur's panicked eyes, I realized something even worse. My husband hadn't just lied to me. He hadn't just kept secrets. He had used me as a human shield. For 10 years, everyone told me I was the lucky one. At the country club, the other wives would whisper behind their glasses of wine, "Oh, Sarah, you're so lucky. Mark takes such good care of you," they'd say. "You never have to worry about a thing." And on the surface, they were right. Mark provided everything. The 6-bedroom colonial, the black SUV with the heated seats that smelled like new leather, the designer bags. My job was simple. I kept the house perfect. I kept the kids on a schedule that would make a drill sergeant jealous. I was the CEO of the Thorne household. I can still see him sitting at the marble kitchen island, the morning sun hitting his perfectly groomed hair. He always looked so handsome in his custom-tailored suits. He'd slide a stack of papers across the counter while I was busy stirring organic oatmeal. He'd point to the bottom of the page, his thumb covering most of the text. "Just sign here, honey. It's just some boring corporate filings, Sarah. Since you're technically a consultant for the firm, it saves us a fortune on taxes. It's for the kids' college fund. Don't worry your pretty head about the legalese. Just give me your signature." I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was the man who held my hand through 2 C-sections. He was the man who promised at the altar to protect me. I'd spend my Tuesdays sitting at the small desk in the kitchen. I'd stamp documents using an e-signature software he'd set up on my laptop. He called them the Tuesday tasks. I thought I was being a supportive wife. I thought I was helping our family optimize our future. In reality, I was doing the heavy lifting of a C-suite executive while wearing yoga pants and a messy bun. I was a ghost in my own life, a shadow employee in a multi-million-dollar empire built on lies. But as the door clicked shut behind a retreating, frantic Arthur Sterling, the silence of the house felt deafening. The ticking clock in the hallways sounded like a countdown. I realized then that Project Ghost wasn't a tax loophole. It was a graveyard, and my name was on the headstone. I walked toward Mark's home office. The door was heavy oak, always polished, always locked. Mark called it his sanctum. He told the kids never to knock. He told me he needed total silence for the big deals. I had treated that door like a holy relic for a decade. But today, the air felt different. The house felt like it was breathing, watching me. I reached into the large ceramic flower pot at the end of the hallway. My fingers brushed through the dry soil, past the roots of a dying fern, until they hit something cold and metallic. The spare key. He thought I didn't know he hid it there. He thought I never noticed the small things. My hand shook so hard the key rattled against the lock. The room was cold. It smelled like old paper, expensive tobacco, and the lingering scent of Mark's sandalwood cologne. I sat in his leather chair, the chair that cost more than my first car, and opened his laptop. I didn't need to guess the password. He was arrogant. He thought I was too unbusiness-minded to ever even touch his computer. The password was our wedding anniversary, 10/14. The desktop loaded. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I found the hidden drive, the one labeled Household Maintenance. There it was, a folder inside a folder, the Project Ghost files. I opened the first PDF. It was a construction contract for a high-rise in Manhattan, a luxury development that had been in the news for safety violations. Total value, $42 million. I scrolled to the bottom, my breath hitched. In bold digital ink was the signature of the Chief Operating Officer, Sarah Thorne. I hadn't signed this. I had never even seen this project, but there it was, my name, my legal identity, tied to a project that was currently $12 million in the hole and under investigation for using substandard steel. I scrolled further. Offshore accounts, wire transfers to names I didn't recognize, and every single one of them was authorized by, quote, the COO. Mark hadn't just used my signature to save on taxes. He was building a kingdom of fraud, and he had put my neck on the chopping block to pay for the bricks. If the IRS or the FBI came knocking, they wouldn't go to the firm's glass headquarters in the city. They would come here, to the lucky wife. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the mahogany desk. The man I shared a bed with, the man I'd made dinner for every night, had spent 6 years setting me up to be his fall guy. I wasn't his partner, I was his insurance policy. But then I saw a file at the very bottom of the list, a simple Excel sheet titled Tuesday Distribution, Final Phase. I clicked it. The list contained 3 names under a column marked Disposal. My name was at the very top.
but it was the date next to my name that made the blood turn to ice in my veins. The date was tomorrow, and the location listed under disposal wasn't a prison, it was a GPS coordinate for a bridge upstate. But then, I heard the garage door opening downstairs. Mark was home early, and I was still sitting in his chair.
Tomorrow. The date on the screen stared back at me like a death warrant written in glowing pixels. September 16. Beside my name, under a column marked disposal, was a string of codes and a final, chilling note. Transfer of liability complete. Physical exit initiated. Physical exit? What does that mean in the world of high-stakes fraud? Did it mean a quiet divorce? Did it mean he was fleeing the country, leaving me to face the handcuffs alone? Or did it mean something much darker? In the sudden silence of that cold office, the house I had spent 10 years decorating suddenly felt like a cage. Every family photo on the wall looked like a staged lie. Every expensive vase on the shelf felt like a bribe Mark had paid for my silence. "You think I'm small, Mark," I whispered to the empty room. "You think I'm just the girl who keeps the towels fluffy and the children quiet." But Mark had made a fatal mistake. He had forgotten one very important thing about the invisible women of the suburbs. We aren't just moms. We are the chief operating officers of the world's most chaotic organizations. We manage budgets and crises every single day without a break. We notice when a single thing is out of place. And I had a secret of my own. Behind a dusty collection of encyclopedias on the bottom shelf, my fingers brushed against cold plastic. I pulled it out. A small, battered blue notebook. The Blue Ledger. I had started this 6 years ago. Initially, it wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of hope. I wanted to show Mark exactly how much I was contributing. I wanted him to see me as an equal partner. I had recorded everything. Every Tuesday invoice he'd asked me to stamp. Every Project Ghost folder I'd seen him whisk into his briefcase. I had even scribbled down fragments of phone calls I'd overheard while I was folding his shirts. I remembered one entry from 2 years ago. I found it and ran my finger over the ink. Mark laughed today, told Arthur on the phone, "Don't worry about the audit. The shield is impenetrable. She doesn't even know what a derivative is. At the time, I thought the shield was a new software. Now, the truth tasted like copper in my mouth. I was the shield, but as I flipped through the pages now, the entries felt like a roadmap to my survival. This ledger wasn't just a record of unpaid labor anymore. It was a forensic map of a $40 million crime. I grabbed my laptop and plugged in an encrypted drive. I began downloading the Project Ghost directory. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 12%, 20%, and then I found a subfolder that wasn't about construction. It was labeled ST Life Insurance. I opened it. My heart didn't just beat, it hammered against my ribs until it hurt. Mark had taken out a $5 million life insurance policy on me 3 months ago. Double indemnity. If I died in an accidental manner, the payout doubled to $10 million. And the beneficiary? It was a shell company owned solely by Mark Thorne. Physical exit initiated. He wasn't just planning to leave me with the debt. He was planning to leave me in the ground. $10 million was his exit fee from our marriage. Then I heard it, the distinct sharp crunch of gravel outside. A heavy car pulling into the driveway. I froze. My lungs stopped working. The SUV. I knew that sound anywhere. Mark was home. 2 hours early. "No, not now," I hissed. I scrambled. I ripped the thumb drive out. I shoved the blue ledger into the waistband of my leggings. I slammed his laptop shut, wiped the desk with my sleeve,
and sprinted to the kitchen. I grabbed a damp cloth and started scrubbing the counter. I tried to slow my breathing. I tried to make my face look like the lucky wife again. The heavy front door creaked open. "Sarah, you home, honey?" Mark's voice echoed through the house. You'll never guess. The meeting ended early. He walked into the kitchen. He looked perfect, not a hair out of place. He reached out to touch my shoulder. I instinctively flinched, just an inch, but it was enough. His eyes narrowed. "You look pale, Sarah. Are you feeling okay? You're shaking." "Arthur Sterling came by, Mark," I said, my voice trembling. "He called me the COO. He said the feds are coming. He said I'm going to prison." "Mark, why would he say that?" Mark sighed. It was the sound of a man annoyed by a child's question. "Sarah, listen to me. Arthur is panicking because of a routine audit. I used your name on some filings to protect us. It's all legal, honey. I did it for you, for the kids' future." He stepped closer. He loomed over me, cornering me against the marble island. "Did you give him anything, Sarah? Did you tell him anything?" I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. Mark relaxed. A small, terrifying smirk played on his lips. "Good. That's my girl. Stay in your lane and everything stays perfect. I just need to grab a few things from my office. Then pack a bag. We're going to the Hamptons. Tonight." I watched him walk away. I watched the man I had loved walk toward the room where he thought his secrets were locked tight. But I hadn't just copied the files. In those last desperate seconds, I had deleted the entire directory. I had changed the administrator password. The default wife had just revoked his access to his own empire. But as I heard him rattle the office door handle, my stomach dropped. I realized I had made one massive amateur mistake. My phone. It was still sitting on his mahogany desk, right next to his mousepad. And at that exact moment, the screen lit up. It began to ring. The hallway went silent. "Sarah!" Mark's voice boomed from the office. It was a jagged rage I had never heard before. "Why is the U.S. Attorney's Office calling your personal cell phone?" I looked at the back door. I looked at the car keys on the hook. "Come and get me, Mark," I whispered to myself. The heavy oak office door slammed shut. I heard the metallic sound of a deadbolt sliding into place. Click. Mark's voice wasn't the voice of my husband anymore. The man who whispered "I love you" before sleep was gone. This was the voice he used when he was destroying a witness or gutting a rival firm. Cold, precise, lethal. "Sarah." His voice dropped an octave, echoing from the hallway. "Why is a federal prosecutor calling my wife's personal cell phone at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday?" I stood paralyzed behind the kitchen island. My fingers were white-knuckled, gripping the edge of the marble. I could feel the weight of the encrypted drive in my pocket and the sharp corners of the blue ledger tucked against my ribs. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. He didn't look like a villain. He looked like $1 million in a charcoal suit. But in his right hand, he held my phone. The screen was still glowing, casting a ghostly blue light on his palm. The caller ID was a ticking bomb. ADA Elias Vance, U.S. Attorney. They don't call the wives of senior partners to find their husbands, Sarah. They call the partners directly, unless you gave them this number. Unless you've been having conversations I didn't authorize. He took a step forward. I took a step back, my heel hitting the base of the refrigerator. Maybe they're tired of talking to your army of lawyers, Mark. Maybe they're looking for the person whose name is actually on the $40 million contracts. Maybe they know about Project Ghost. Maybe they finally realized that the Tuesday invoices I've been signing for 6 years weren't just tax optimizations. Mark let out a short, sharp laugh. It was hollow, with no trace of humor. "You've been in my office," he whispered. "You took the key from the fern. I've been in our office, Mark. The office where you decided my life was worth exactly $5 million in insurance money. I saw the policy. I saw the double indemnity clause. Tell me, Mark, what was the plan? A tragic brake failure? A home invasion gone wrong while you were safely at a gala?" Mark didn't deny it. He didn't gasp. He didn't try to feed me another lie.
He just leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms.
It wasn't personal, Sarah. It was business. The firm was over-leveraged. We needed a firewall, someone the feds would focus on while we moved the assets offshore. You were the perfect candidate. You were a stay-at-home mom. No jury would believe you were a criminal mastermind, but every auditor would see your signature on the bottom line. You were my safety net. And the insurance? I asked. Was that just business too? The exit strategy, he replied. If the feds got too close, your departure would have triggered a payout that cleared the firm's debts and set the kids up for life. You would have been a martyr for this family. You should be thanking me. A martyr? He wanted to erase me and call it a sacrifice. The rage in my gut finally boiled over. I pulled the blue ledger out from my waistband and tossed it onto the marble island. It slid across the surface, stopping inches from his hand. I'm a very good COO, Mark. You taught me well. And a good COO keeps a secondary set of books. That is 6 years of evidence. Every Tuesday task, every offshore routing number you dictated while I was making the kids' lunches. I even have the audio from the nanny cam I moved into your office 6 months ago. Mark's composure finally cracked. The mask of the sophisticated lawyer shattered. He lunged for the notebook, but I was faster. I grabbed it back and backed away toward the door to the garage. Don't bother going back to your laptop, Mark. I didn't just look, Mark. I deleted the entire Project Ghost directory. I changed the server encryption. I wiped the backups. You're locked out of your own fraud. You're a king with no kingdom. You think you're smart, Mark hissed, his face turning dark. You just signed your own confession. If I go down for fraud, you go down for every document you signed. We share a bed and we'll share a cell. No, I'm not your co-conspirator. I'm the whistleblower. I called ADA Vance an hour ago. I told him I had the ledger. I told him I was a victim of corporate identity theft. I'm ready to testify. Are you? Then I heard them. Sirens in the far distance, rising in a frantic, wailing crescendo. Mark's head snapped toward the front window. The blue and red lights were already dancing off the white picket fence. The Tuesday tasks are finished, Mark, I said. And as the COO of this family, you're fired. 3 black SUVs pulled into the driveway. The arrest was unnervingly quiet. Mark stood in the foyer as the FBI agents clicked the silver handcuffs onto his wrists. As they led him past me toward the door, he stopped. You think you won, Sarah? He whispered. You're nothing without my name. You're just a housewife with a used notebook. You won't last a week. I was never just a housewife, Mark. I was the one keeping the lights on while you were busy playing God. I ran the company from the kitchen table. You were just the one who went to the luncheons. I stood in my driveway, the white-hot afternoon sun beating down on the back of my neck, but I didn't feel the heat. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a walk-in freezer. The black SUVs were gone. The FBI agents were gone. Life in Scarsdale was pretending to return to normal, but the Polaroid in my hand felt like it was burning a hole straight through my palm. I looked at the image again. My skin crawled. It wasn't a grainy, long-distance surveillance shot. It was crisp. It was intimate. I could see the exact expression of raw terror on my face the moment I realized Mark had betrayed me. As I held the blue ledger to my chest in the kitchen, the person who took this hadn't been across the street. They had been inches away from the glass. They had been watching me breathe. The Tuesday invoices were only the beginning. I whispered those words aloud, and they felt like a rhythmic curse. Mark hadn't been the king. He hadn't been the mastermind. He had been a middleman, a flashy, arrogant distraction, meant to draw the eye while the real players moved in the shadows. I retreated into the house and locked the front door. I slid the heavy security bolt into place. The silence of the mansion, once my sanctuary, now felt predatory. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. I sat at the kitchen island, the place where I had played the role of the dutiful, lucky wife for 10 years. I laid out the blue ledger and the encrypted drive. My hands were shaking, but my mind was beginning to crystallize. If Mark was just a shield, who was he shielding? Who was big enough to make a $40 million fraud look like a distraction? I opened the ledger to the very back, a section I'd labeled the unaccounted. Wire transfers. Every third Thursday of every month, always to an account simply labeled maintenance. $12,500 every single month. That's $150,000 a year. We had a pool guy and a landscaper, sure, but they didn't cost the price of a luxury sports car. I bypassed the law firm's main server. I used a backdoor password I'd found in Mark's files. I dug back 3 years into the maintenance archives. The payments didn't go to a company. They didn't go to a contractor. They went to a private, offshore-linked account held by a woman named Elena Vance. I froze. The air left my lungs. The name of the assistant U.S. attorney I had just spoken to, the man who was supposed to be my savior, was Elias Vance. Was it a coincidence? In this world, there are no coincidences. I pulled up a private database. I typed in the name, Elena Vance, age 68, mother of Elias Vance, deceased spouse, Thomas Vance, former senior partner at Mark's firm. The room began to tilt. Arthur Sterling hadn't just hired Elias Vance's father. He had been paying for the man's widow's lavish lifestyle for years. He had bought a federal prosecutor before the boy even graduated from law school. This wasn't just a law firm. It was a multi-generational syndicate. The Tuesday invoices weren't just about tax evasion. They were the bribe ledger, a list of every politician, every judge, and every prosecutor on the payroll. And I had just called the lead prosecutor and told him I had the list. I had handed him the key to his own destruction. I didn't have much time. I knew how these people operated. They didn't leave loose ends. I grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing things in. Spare clothes, the kids' passports, the blue ledger. As I zipped the bag, the house phone, the landline I never used, began to ring. I picked up the receiver. I didn't say hello. Sarah, Arthur Sterling's voice said. He sounded calm, almost bored. I told you Mark was a hothead. He drew too much attention. He was supposed to be the exit, but he got greedy. I have the proof, Arthur, I said, my voice cold. I have the ledger. I have the names. You can't kill the files. I've already uploaded them to a dead man switch. A dead man switch only works if you're actually dead, Sarah. He chuckled softly. And quite frankly, we'd prefer you alive for now. Check the side pocket of your duffel bag. I looked down. My heart stopped. Tucked into the mesh siding of the bag was a small, circular black device, a GPS tracker. The light on it was blinking a steady, rhythmic red. Elias is on his way back to your house now, Sarah. He's not coming to take a statement, Sarah. He's coming to secure his family's future. If you don't give him that book, a tragic house fire happens today. A distraught wife, overwhelmed by her husband's crimes, takes her own life. It's a clean story. I dropped the phone. It dangled by the cord, hitting the wall with a hollow thud. kitchen window, I saw a sleek silver sedan idling at the curb. Elias Vance stepped out. He looked up at the window and smiled. I didn't run for the front door. I headed for the basement. I heard the front door open. Elias had a key. I knew this basement better than anyone. I knew that behind the built-in wine rack, there was a maintenance crawl space that led to an old storm cellar beneath the backyard. I scrambled down the stairs. I crawled into the narrow, dusty space, pulling the heavy wine rack shut behind me. "Sarah!" Elias's voice echoed down the stairs. It was smooth and terrifying. "I know you're here. Let's not make this difficult. I'm here to help you. I just need to see that ledger first." I held my breath. I could hear his footsteps directly above me. The floorboards groaned. I saw a beam of light from his flashlight sweep across the basement floor. It stopped, right on the wine rack. Then, my phone alarm suddenly vibrated. Bzzz! It was 3:30 p.m., the daily alarm, the time I usually left to pick up the kids from school. The sound echoed in the cellar. Elias stopped. I heard him move toward the rack. "Found you, Sarah," he said. The wood began to splinter.
The wine rack didn't just move. It shrieked as Elias Vance threw his entire weight against it. He wasn't the polished federal prosecutor anymore. He was a desperate man fighting to bury a legacy that was already starting to rot. Dust and ancient cobwebs rained down on me in the suffocating dark of the crawl space. "Sarah!" Elias roared. "Give it to me, now! You're a suburban mother with a laundry list. You can't stop people like us. You don't even know how the world works." I backed further into the damp, dirt-smelling shadows. My fingers brushed against a rusted, freezing iron handle. The old storm cellar door. I heard glass shattering. Dozens of bottles of vintage wine were smashing onto the concrete floor. The air filled with the heavy scent of wasted alcohol. He was through. The rack swung wide. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, blinding me. I squinted, my heart hammering against the blue ledger tucked into my waistband. "I have the ledger, Elias," I said, my voice cold and steady. "But you're wrong about the world. I'm the woman who's been processing your mother's maintenance payments for 3 years. I didn't just sign the checks. I tracked the routing numbers. I have the metadata on every bribe you ever took." Elias froze. The flashlight beam wavered. You didn't look that deep," he whispered. "Mark said you were just a clicker, a mindless processor." "Mark was a narcissist," I whispered back. "He thought I was looking at numbers to help him succeed. I was looking at lives. I was looking at you, Elias." "Give it to me!" He lunged into the crawl space. I didn't wait. I threw the blue ledger, not to him, but past him. It soared through the air and landed with a wet thud in the pool of spilled wine on the basement floor. As he scrambled backwards, slipping on the glass to grab it, I yanked the iron handle with every ounce of my rage. The storm cellar door flew open. I scrambled up the stone steps and out into the backyard. The humid New York air hit my face like a slap. I didn't run for the driveway. I ran for the woods, the shortcut that led directly to the elementary school. I sat in my SUV in the back corner of the school parking lot. I watched my children run toward the car. Their backpacks were bouncing. Their faces were bright. They had no idea the world had ended an hour ago. "Hey, Mommy!" my daughter cried. "Why are we leaving early?" "Change of plans, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "We're going on a little adventure. We're going to see Grandma in Maine, right now." As I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked at the passenger seat. I reached into the waistband of my leggings and pulled out the real blue ledger. I hadn't thrown the truth into that basement. I had thrown a decoy, a notebook filled with my daughter's old 3rd grade math homework. Elias Vance was currently sitting in a puddle of wine, clutching a book of long division, while I drove away with his life in my hands.
The real ledger was tucked safely under my seat, and the encrypted drive, I had already dropped it into a blue USPS box. I hadn't sent it to the local police. I had sent it to the Department of Justice's Internal Affairs and the New York Times. It took 3 months for the Project Ghost scandal to reach the front pages. Elias Vance was arrested at his desk. Arthur Sterling tried to flee, but they caught him at the airport. And Mark sat in a jail cell and realized that the shield he had built wasn't meant to protect him. It was meant to crush him. The judge called my evidence the masterpiece of a silent partner. The court ruled that Mark's attempt to frame me was a separate felony. I wasn't the COO of a fraud. I was the primary witness to a crime. I didn't stay in Scarsdale. I didn't want the white marble islands or the laundry rooms built on lies.
I sold the house using a legal loophole I had found in my own Tuesday invoices. I used Mark's own greed to fund my escape. I moved to the coast of Maine. It's quiet here. The air smells like salt and pine. Every now and then, I look at that Polaroid photo, the one the ghost took of me in my kitchen. I kept it as a reminder, not of the fear, but of the exact second I realized I was the most dangerous person in the room. Mark thought he could hide a mountain of crimes behind a simple woman. He forgot the oldest rule of the house. The person who cleans the floors is the one who knows exactly where the dirt is hidden. Justice didn't just knock on my door. I let it in. I gave it a seat at my table, and I showed it exactly where the bodies were buried. I stopped being the default wife. I became the one who closed the deal. My name is Sarah Thorne, and this was my Tuesday.